Hello from me, David Foster. A warm welcome to the programme. When a coronavirus vaccine is found, that should be the end of it, surely, or not. The race is on, but even if scientists say they found a vaccine, what if the virus mutates? What if inoculation only protects us for a while? What if the fact that this is a race actually does more harm than good? A lot of what ifs. You're watching Roundtable. Quite clearly, massive profits are there to be made. Somewhere between 50 and 100 trials taking place worldwide. On this show, we'll be examining the obstacles to making us all safer, and we'll be hearing from one volunteer who's allowed himself to be deliberately infected.
As COVID-19 continues to spread around the world, there has been an urgent race to find a vaccine, with leaders across the globe promising billions in funding. Over 100 trials are being conducted, including projects in the US, UK and China. Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health in the UK, has pledged $25 million of funding in the Oxford University project and $28 million for trials at Imperial College London. Experts say it could take at least 18 months until a vaccine becomes available. But other treatments such as antiviral drugs could help with the fight against COVID-19. However, David Nabarro, Professor of Global Health at Imperial College London, says humans will have to live with the threat of coronavirus for the foreseeable future because there's no guarantee that a vaccine will be successfully developed. While governments and industries continue to work hard towards a vaccine, when will it be ready and will it be available for everyone?
Well, we've split this programme up a little bit differently. In a short while, we'll be hearing from Alex Munster, NHS Doctor with an interest in vaccine research, and the virologist Rob Lambkin-Williams. We'll also go to Toronto to hear from James Barratt, Secretary General of Vaccines for Life. But first, we welcome to the roundtable out of Oxford, Edward O'Neill, who was one of the first two people injected as part of trials for a potential vaccine being developed by Oxford University's Jenner Institute. Edward, good to have you on the programme. This was, what, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago almost? You're looking pretty good.
Yes, I'm feeling fine. So it's coming on to day 19 now, and I don't know if I received the actual vaccine or just a vaccine which is for meningitis, which is given to all teenagers in the UK. So I could be fine, just like any other teenager.
So what happens now?
So currently, I am being monitored every day for my temperature. So I just have a thermometer they've sent me home with, and they also have a online diary in which you can enter any symptoms you might have. Although, in anything that might be as mild or as trivial, they still want to know just to understand what the common effects might be of a vaccine like this. And those are the information they'll provide then to the regulatory bodies so that they're fully upfront with whatever what impact this vaccine might have on itself. But what is crucial to know is whether or not I actually get coronavirus just being exposed to the community. And so they also want to know if I have any symptoms so they can come and check me if I got infected to check if the vaccine is effective at protecting me or I'm just in the control group, but I don't know. So they need to know those key bits of information, the temperature and the any potential symptoms and whether or not I have coronavirus.
So they take you into a sterile environment. They are preparing to give you an injection. Nervous?
Um, well, I think honestly, I wasn't nervous about the actual vaccine itself. I was confident about it. I'm confident in the science. Knew that it was very minimal risk because it was based upon an existing vaccine scaffold that was already injected into people based upon a MERS vaccine. I wasn't worried about the actual vaccine itself. If anything, I was just a little bit nervous about there's going to be cameras around. And my heart rate was pumping a little bit because I was just, haven't been in front of cameras like that and be interviewed immediately afterwards. That was the only thing that I was nervous about, to be honest.
You do it again then?
I'll do it again. Well, if they would let me, if the circumstances arise. But I'm I'm actually in the group which only had one injection. There's another group that actually gets two injections, but I was assigned to be that one group that was just getting one injection of potentially of the candidate vaccine.
So you could end up feeling quite ill, but the chances are after 18, 19 days, you're not going to. So what are your thoughts on what they did give you?
So I'm confident that the results of both myself and the other participant in the first 48 hours, as a precaution, they wanted to ensure that there wasn't any immediate sort of side effects or concern to before they would then start injecting in many, many more people. So I'm confident based on that, and I don't know what the symptoms are of the other participant or of the other any other participant, but I know that I'm confident that they have been as cautious as they can be and been as careful as they can be, so that there aren't any sort of worrying signs, and they've progressed to have many more people in order to ensure that they have enough reasonable number of people they can have a good statistical number to then compare the two groups, the control group and the coronavirus candidate vaccine group. So I'm confident that seems to be safe for them to progress to that stage.
Did you at any stage think you were risking your life?
I didn't think I was risking my life, and to be honest, I think everyone has been doing a risk assessment just to go to the shops these days in terms of any potential risks you have. I'm more concerned about, catching coronavirus itself, or to be honest, I was probably more concerned about, having a bike accident on the way there. I wasn't actually worried about the risk of the vaccine because it was already a known the risks or the any potential side effects with the MERS candidate vaccine that they already developed. And I know that they were being as cautious and as careful as possible, and they would never go into humans unless they've got clear evidence of it working first in animal models, in non-human primates, and in fact and I know they're doing it as fast as they can because they had a multidisciplinary meeting with experts across the country to discuss that morning before they gave an injection to me. So I knew everything was done quickly but very carefully. So I was confident that they had my safety in mind.
Well, Edward, we thank you very much indeed. Do stay well, and we'll be interested to hear what the results are. Thanks very much indeed once again.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, let us bring in now Alex Munster, NHS Doctor, who has experience of vaccine research, and the virologist, Dr. Rob Lambkin-Williams. Great to have you both on the programme. Rob, you first of all. There is no vaccination for HIV, no vaccination for elephantiasis, hookworm, liver flukes, Nipah, Lassa, Middle East respiratory syndrome, and I could go on and on and on. What are the chances of getting a vaccine for this one?
Well, starting in virology was trying the HIV pandemic. That was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. We still don't have a vaccine against that viral infection, despite millions of people have died and billions have been spent on research. So vaccine development isn't simple. The chance of getting a vaccine for this virus, I think, are pretty good. How quickly we're going to get there is going to be the question. Vaccine technology has moved on. This is a virus we know relatively well, but has never been as pathogenic and as virulent as it is now. Therefore, there's never been the surge and the desire to get a vaccine. So I think we will get there with a vaccine, but it's going to take a little bit longer than most people think.
Is that because of the amount of work, the amount of money that's being put in and the number of projects around the world? Or is it because of the nature of the virus itself that you think we will get there, which we haven't done with others?
The two are distinct. The amount of investment in not just money, although that obviously helps, but simple time and resource to actually be able to do studies, to actually say this vaccine protects against this virus. All of that, that's one element of it. Then there is the nature of the virus. Now, HIV, which is the example I used, that is a very different type of virus and a very different virus to actually try to develop a vaccine for. So different viruses, some are very stable. They don't change very much. They don't mutate very much. They lock down, like smallpox. Great example. Smallpox only had one human host. It only grew in humans, only infected humans. We vaccinated, very stable, vaccinated all the humans. We got rid of smallpox completely. Flu, a virus we have to vaccinate against every year because it changes every year, but we do have a vaccine. This is a new virus. We've known about it for about 5 months. It's a little bit more stable than flu, but it does vary. Like all viruses, it mutates. So we will see variation. So yes,
Yeah, and I understand it has mutated a couple of times already. So what do you make of this from David Nabarro, WHO, World Health Organization's COVID-19 special envoy, who says there are some viruses that we still don't have vaccines against. We cannot make an absolute assumption that a vaccine will appear at all, or if it does, whether it will pass all the tests of efficiency and safety. What happens medically if we don't get a vaccine? Rob, and then I'll come to you. I haven't forgotten you, Alex. I'll be there in a second, but Rob, you first.
Well, if it doesn't pass the tests on safety, it will never get licensed, and that's the fundamental rule. We would never put an unsafe vaccine out there knowingly.
Alex, I think you worked on malaria vaccine research for a small period of time. There is no malaria vaccine, and yet President Trump is sending over to the UK anti-malarial hydroxychloroquine, which is a malaria drug, to test on vulnerable groups. We've accepted his offer. What do you make of that?
I think it's very difficult. There's varying data for and against the use of hydroxychloroquine. Just at the end of April, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the US concluded that there was no sort of conclusive evidence that it was beneficial or causing harm for treating patients with COVID. However, we have to be careful because when this information gets out, it is dangerous, even sometimes when the drugs aren't. This misinformation that it might be useful for COVID has caused deaths in the US, particularly when it's used in combination with other drugs like azithromycin. It can cause fatal cardiac arrhythmias. So we have to be very careful about what we recommend, the data that we look at when analysing these drugs.
What about alternative therapies? I've read a little bit about something called CRISPR. I've read about gene therapy. What do you make of those ideas of tackling things that we can't otherwise get a hold of?
I think it's a good idea to look at all options. Vaccination, prophylaxis, preventing the disease in the first place is a very attractive idea, but it takes time, as Rob was alluding to. There are a number of other things. You've mentioned already hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. Similarly, sort of repurposing medications that we already know to work. And there is research into other antivirals, general antivirals. Of note, remdesivir, which was initially developed for Hep C and was subsequently used for Ebola and Marburg virus disease, was not shown to be effective actually for those diseases, but that's being used as well. So repurposing old medications seems to be one avenue of research. Also the use of antibodies, so what we call passive immunity, when we introduce antibodies into someone's system, possibly from people who have developed those antibodies, having caught the virus previously and developing some sort of immunity towards it, is another option. And we can also produce these antibodies in the lab. So yeah, there are a number of options other than just focusing on vaccines, albeit
on a vaccine. Rob, what do you know about CRISPR, which is an acronym, isn't it? CRISPR technology and/or gene therapy, or am I barking up the wrong tree here?
Those technologies are very new, extremely new. CRISPR's a few years old, that's all. So the speed with which we'd be able to get a compound, a mechanism, a therapy based on CRISPR, even with emergency licensure, would be quite a long time. Drugs like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, they've had very mixed results, quite a few emergent fatalities, and in some of the studies. And in fact, there's been an emergency directive from the FDA about misuse of hydroxychloroquine. Remdesivir, which I always mispronounce, actually has emergency licensure to use and is actually being distributed in the States at the moment. And that sort of repurposing of old drugs to which we can be confident have a safety profile, like older vaccine technologies that have a safety profile. They're where we're going to get something that might be useful first. CRISPR's a very, very new technology, very fastly developing, but there's a lot of safety.
Well, quick thought, and tell us if you can very quickly what it is.
CRISPR is basically you can re-edit somebody's genome or re-edit somebody effectively very quickly, and to actually make them less or more susceptible to an infection, if you like. In this context, is one idea. There was a Chinese scientist who did this to some twins in China, got into a great deal of trouble for doing so. It's far too experimental to actually be anything that you're likely to be able to use coming soon. You need to go back to some of the more tried and tested platforms for vaccines, like traditional vaccines such as flu, which we use regularly. We know how that works. If we can develop a vaccine based on that technology, that would be great. It won't give lifelong protection. I don't think you're going to get a vaccine that will do that for this virus, but you would get a vaccine developed. And we've done that with flu, and we change flu every single year.
So there's the chances are we are all going to get it at some point, I imagine. This is from David Hunter, a professor of epidemiology and medicine at Oxford University. With any vaccine, you only get a portion of the population that stays immune, so the virus keeps circulating, but at a much lower rate. We shouldn't hope that any vaccine will absolutely eliminate COVID-19 in a matter of months, even years, but it should be helpful in controlling it. Alex, it's not going away, whatever we find out, is it?
I mean, it's unlikely, as Rob was alluding to earlier. The chances that we completely eliminate this, given that this virus will mutate as influenza does, even if we were to develop something which is effective against this, there's no reason why another coronavirus wouldn't emerge. If we think back to SARS in 2002, MERS in 2012, these are all coronaviruses. So if we get a vaccine which is effective against this novel coronavirus, there's no reason to say that it might mutate and there might be other strains which the vaccine doesn't protect against. And obviously the length of immunity that you get with any given vaccine is different. So, yeah.
I mean, a key point.
So what sort of world medically, not socially, but medically, would we be looking at if we have to live with this virus? It doesn't go away, and we're simply controlling it. Yeah, Rob, you wanted to say something.
No, I was simply going to say one of the reasons we were able to eliminate smallpox is because its only host was human beings, and so once we vaccinated enough human beings, the virus died out, and that's it. This virus existed in bats. It went via another species and then came to humans. And this virus exists in many other species. So therefore, this type of virus will always be around. So it's close to impossible to eliminate this virus as such, because it exists in other species, not uniquely human beings. And that's a very important point. So we will be chasing the virus all the time. But it doesn't mean that a vaccine can't be extremely beneficial, and particularly to people who are at risk of serious complications if they get infected.
Okay, well, we spoke at the beginning to Edward O'Neill, a volunteer who allowed himself to be ejected as part of the Jenner Institute trials at Oxford University. Alex, I think you've got an association or had an association with the Jenner Institute at some point. If they called you up and said, we'd like you to come and be a guinea pig, if you like, would you go through a trial like that?
I think, it's difficult to say. I probably would, but obviously, being a doctor on the front line, I can't jeopardize the sort of the risk of my patients. So I can't, if there was any chance that I was to develop symptoms or pass it on in any way, I think that.
Yeah, but you don't think they're rushing these things through a little bit too quickly, do you?
It's, again, very difficult to say. In an ideal world, were so many people not catching it and so many people not dying from it, there wouldn't be this need to rush things through. We would go through all the proper preclinical testing in cells, in tissue culture, in animals. We wouldn't be rushing it. So I think, given this global pandemic that we're facing, I think that it is appropriate that we speed things up, but obviously we always have to operate with maximum
Alex,
safety at every stage.
Thanks very much. Final one for you, Rob, because one of the questions I asked at the beginning of the program was, if there is a race to get a vaccine, could it be more dangerous than just waiting and seeing exactly what happened? The race itself could be a danger. Is that a possibility?
I don't think there's going to be any. There won't be any relaxation on the safety aspects of the vaccine. That's in no one's interest. There will be ways for doing it more efficiently, more cleverly, and probably maybe pushing a little bit about the bureaucracy of doing certain things. But safety, I don't think will be skimped on at all. One of the issues may well be that we have several hundred potential vaccine candidates in out there, basically, that we want to test. Is a way of actually being able to have enough people to test them on who are going to actually get the virus, because we're coming out of the first peak of this infection in the UK at least. We'll have another wave, and there are predictions that we'll have up to 3 or 4 waves of these infections coming on with this virus. So
yeah, I know, but we aren't there yet, even with 1 or 2 vaccines to try. 60 or 70 seems a possible long way off. Listen, I have to say thank you both very much indeed.
100 being looked at.
Well, they're being looked at, but they're not necessarily out there to be tried at the moment. Rob, thank you very much for coming on once again. Alex, good to meet you. Thank you for being part of our discussion.
Thank you.
Well, finally in this program, we can cross to Toronto in Canada and speak to Jane Barratt, Secretary General of Vaccines for Life. Jane, you were a bit concerned, I understand it, that the race for this COVID-19 vaccine is pushing interest in other inoculations to one side.
It's vitally important right at this time that the focus is on the control of this disease and also the race for the vaccine. But at the International Federation on Aging, who is owner of this Vaccine for Life program, is very concerned that the rates of influenza and pneumococcal vaccination may be pushed to one side. And it's really important because the same vulnerable groups that are being attacked with this virus, are those very groups that are dying from influenza and pneumococcal pneumonia every single year.
Yes, on your website it says our vision, a world of healthy older people whose rights to safe and appropriate vaccines are protected and respected through programs that hold high the principles of prevention, access and equity. I want to concentrate on access here. If a virus is found within the next 15 months, are you concerned that the group that you specifically care for, the aged population, might not be prioritised?
Oh, absolutely. Do you know, David, I'm one of those older people. In some countries, 50 and over is an older person. And if we look at the WHO targets, the targets for children are 90%, but adults, the target is only 75%. And there are very few countries around the world that reach those targets. So, we also know that a vaccine is a fair way off. And the number of doses that we'll require is about 800 million. So if we're prioritising this vaccine, who do you think is going to get it first? And of course, healthcare workers are absolutely critical because they're our frontline warriors. But equally, older people contribute significantly socially and economically to every single country in the world.
I've spoken to quite a few accident and emergency doctors who have to deal with COVID patients as they come in during the course of this series of programs. And one thing they say is they're not necessarily seeing as many people who are just hurt coming into their departments. Is there that danger with this, that older people will think, hang on, I've just got to worry about COVID at the moment. I needn't worry about the things that are actually always there, the underlying health conditions. I don't want to get them checked out. I don't want to worry anybody, etc., etc.
Sure. Look, we know that there's been an increase in people that have heart attacks and died, strokes, falls, those the so-called normal kind of conditions that are fronting up to emergency, where there's a decrease globally. And that's because fundamentally our healthcare systems are broken, inadequate, or just absent. And so, they are stretched beyond capacity. And so a person with a so-called normal condition of a heart attack, there's a fear that they won't be seen, or there's a fear that they will have COVID. think the other thing that we're dealing with is mixed messages from government. Stay home, you'll be protected, don't go out, etc., etc. And so not only is that causing, concern for older people, they just don't know whether to go or not go, or how do they best protect themselves.
So I suppose your message is, even while we're going through this, and it's certainly going to be a matter of months till we get a vaccine, it may be years, you have to live your life as normal. You have to take care of yourself the best way that you can. Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much indeed. And to anybody who thinks being over 50 is elderly, I'm sorry, you can just go away as far as I'm concerned. Jane, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, wherever you happen to be, for watching this edition of Roundtable. From me, David Foster, from the producers and everybody who made the program possible, our thanks. We'll see you next time, I hope. Goodbye.